Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is the goddess of DC, Rayceen Pendarvis. Hey Rayceen.
Hey love, greetings and salutations all.
It is so good to be here with you today because today we have an amazing special guest with us, and that is Jewelle Gomez. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
It is such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you so much. How we love to get things kicked off here is just by having our guests introduce themselves to our audience and letting them know a little bit about your background and your experience. So I will give you the floor.
Okay, well, that works out well since I am a fiction writer. So I'm originally from Boston, but I lived in New York for about 22 years, and I now live in Oakland. I've been in the Bay Area for a little over almost 30 years now. Yikes. I originally worked in theater as a stage manager. I worked in television when I was much younger. And then I did some poetry, and I worked on fiction. The Gilda Stories was probably my magnus opus. You know, it's been in print for 30 years and been a play. It's now been optioned for a film. So that's the thing that people know me most for. I did some activism at younger ages. The Gilda Stories was a long time coming while I was working in philanthropy, but I did some activism. I was on the board of GLAAD when it first started. And I actually came back to theater and started doing plays. So I've had four plays produced so far, and I'm working on my next one, which should premiere in New Conservatory Theater here in the Bay Area in 23, the beginning of 23. And I actually was just featured in, and this is kind of bizarre, but it was really sweet. This filmmaker who I know and love, Madeline Lim, runs a project called Queer Women of Color Media Arts Project. And she did this documentary about me. And her feeling was, let's do documentaries about people before they're dead. And I thought, okay, I like that. So it premiered this past weekend at the film festival for Madeline's organization, Clock Map. And it was really amazing. It was fun it was the first event I'd been out in publicly in 2 years.
Wow.
It was, because of the pandemic.
Yes.
So that was great in that I got to see a bunch of people I haven't seen in 2 years. And so while I've been working on my plays, I'm also had published a new collection of poetry. And by the Black Lesbian Feminist Press, which is run by Stephanie Andrea Allen, and she's kind of an amazing person who decided to start a press, and BLF has been going strong for a while. And so just this 2 weeks ago, she published my newest collection of poetry, which is called Still Water. And I've been saving up poems for several years, and I sent her the poems because they did a call for BLF Press and said, if this is of any interest to you, I don't know, you just don't know when you send things out. And I never send things out to the big publishers because that's kind of like, I don't know, spitting in the wind in a way. I hate to use such an ugly expression, but so I thought I'll start with the small press again, since a small independent press published the Gilda stories. So Stillwater just came out 2 weeks ago, and BLF Press is organizing readings for me and stuff like that. So that's who I am up to this week. Oh, and I can tell you one thing that I'm really, really proud of. I mean, I'm proud of a lot of things, but one of them is I last year received the Legacy Award from the Horror Writers Association.
Oh.
And so that was really a big surprise and really kind of exciting that they would recognize the position that the Gilda Stories holds in the community of horror writers.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, let's talk about the Gilda Stories a little bit, because the cover I just showed was that 30th anniversary cover. So talk to me a little bit about why you wanted to center this kind of story, exploring, a lesbian story, with the background of, vampires and horror and all of that. What was it that made you want to explore it, through that lens?
Well, I'd always been interested in speculative fiction. Joanna Russ is one of my favorite writers, and she really encouraged me. And this incident, which I've written about, happened one evening when I was in Manhattan. My phone was out of order at home, or I hadn't paid the bill. I can't quite remember. But I went down to the corner to call my pal, Marianne. And as I was standing in this phone booth, these guys walked by and started harassing me. And they were really lewd and, oh, baby, let me, and all the stuff they were going to do. And, that typical crap that women go through all the time. But I was furious. I don't know what happened, but you know how people say they see red? That's what I was like, I snapped. And I turned around and I started screaming like a maniac. And one of the guys, he realized they were in trouble. He grabbed the other guy and said, man, she's crazy, she's crazy. And he started dragging him away. And to this day, I'm grateful that I had nothing at hand. There was no garbage can I could pick up and beat them with. I was so furious. And it was the fury of women who are harassed on the street every day. It was like it built up. I don't know where. I wasn't expecting it. So I heard my friend saying, Jewel, are you okay? Are you okay? I said, Marianne, I'm fine. Used to see the other guy. And I hung up the phone and I went home and I wrote the first Gilda story. And it welled up out of me, this idea of women being so brutalized and the culture trying to make us feel like we're not worthy, like we are subject to everyone else except our own selves. And so that's how I came up with the story of the escaped slave. And it's the first story, which isn't in the novel, but I'm using it in the sequel, which I'm working on, in which she gets attacked by a guy on the street who doesn't realize she's a vampire. So I get my revenge through the first.
Yes.
And how do you feel now? When people are doing the work, because you've done the work, and you're continuing to do the work as an activist, as an author, as a playwright, as a feminist, being bold and being groundbreaking and being trailblazer, and you never know how the world looks at you, because whenever I have heard your name or ever read your work, to me, it's like, oh my God, this iconic figure in our community. It's like, oh my God, it's like, your name just resonates and it rings, especially in our community, that it will always, you will be one of those amazing lights, those figures that will just be larger than life because of the work that you've done. And now having a documentary, how did it feel sitting in there watching your life on the big screen?
I will say it was very surprising. Some things really moved me a lot. I often feel like I talk way too much. But I thought Madeline did a really good job. She decided since she didn't have a lot of money, so she filmed only in the Bay Area. And a lot of it she filmed on a weekend that one of my plays was opening. So it turned out my former publisher, Nancy Bariano, who had published The Gilda Stories with her own publishing company, Firebrand Books. She was in town. She had her partner, Elizabeth. One of my oldest friends, Catherine Acey, who for many, many years was the executive director of the Estrella Lesbian Foundation, which I had been on the founding board of. She was in town. Well, my dear, dear oldest friend, and as we say in the lesbian community, former lover, was in town, Cheryl Clark, who's one of our most fabulous and amazing poets. She was in town. And my brother was in town, my half-brother, who lives back east, and he came out for my play. It was just very, very dear. So Madeline was able to capture these people talking about their experiences with me. And I think for me, that was the most moving, to hear how I was affecting others. And hearing my brother in particular, because we did not grow up in the same household. My mother raised him, but she did not raise me. And so to hear his emotional recounting of his understanding of what I missed because I wasn't with our mother, I was very touched. I was very touched by that. I didn't expect to be that moved because, it's mostly me talking.
But it's such a I can't wait to see it because I'm a documentary queen, so it is on my list. I love documentaries, and when we were honored
yes,
by the National Black Justice Coalition, and it's
I
so
got
funny.
I got my picture.
I got mine finally. It's so big, but look,
There you are.
There we are.
And it's humongous. And we got it. And I just, and I was saying, I'm so happy I have a special place on my wall in my living room where it's going to be. And I think I moved it twice, but I think I'm going to put it right by when, as soon as you open the front door, it'll be the first thing you see. So I want my whole family to see it in that space. So I've moved it twice. So that's the second location it will be now.
I'm still hiding.
It's so funny, but when you think about all those wonderful accolades along this amazing journey, and you're still living it, because people say, oh, I want to write your story, I want to do your documentary, but it's someone who is still living it. It's like, honey, I'm still living.
I'm still in it. Yes, I feel very appreciative that they figured out to do it while I could see it. And of course, it makes me want to add to it. So there might have to be a part 2. But I think for me, the biggest deal is, and I think I try to say this in the documentary, is that I am this one life, not that different from a lot of other young lesbians of color. The biggest deal for me is that I happened to come of age during these movements.
Mm-hmm.
Civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement, the anti-war movement. So the idea of activism was baked into me as a young person. And I carried that with me and still do as a natural part of everything I do, like whatever I'm writing, all of the things that made me an activist as a younger person still drive me today. And it's not that my life was so extraordinary as much as I learned to be in the world in a particularly conscious way. And that could be true of all of us or any of us.
Certainly.
You know?
Certainly. Well, your latest, collection of poems, Still Water. Tell me some of the themes that you explore, because as you said, you've been writing these poems for a while now. It's a collection that you've been working on. So what are some of the themes that you explore in these poems and some of the messages that you're kind of bringing forward with this collection?
Okay. Well, I, like most sentient beings on the planet, was really affected by the Black Lives Matter protests and the deaths that generated them. And seeing so many people, so many different kinds of people come together. And we couldn't bring Brianna or George back to life. And they say that you're always alive as long as you remain in somebody's memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made me think about the very first person that I heard of who had suffered police violence. And that was in the early 80s. Eleanor Bumpers in New York City was, I don't even remember how old she was, but she was described as an elderly, disturbed Black woman. And she was being evicted. Well, let's start with, if she was elderly and she was mentally disabled in some way, why was she being evicted? I mean, hello? She should have been maybe moved to some facility that would help her. So she was being evicted in the Bronx. The police came and she, quote unquote, had a knife, a kitchen knife. So the police, in terrible fear of their lives from this elderly woman, shot her with a double-barrel shotgun. Now, I don't know that much about guns, but I watch enough TV to know that if you are shot with a double-barrel shotgun, it is a big hole. Mm-hmm. And it's not just stopping you, it is decimating you. And so all of the, long story, sorry, but that made me think about Eleanor Bumpers and how shocked and hurt I had been at the time, and how many deaths have happened since Eleanor Bumpers. So I wrote a poem about her and her giving advice, basically saying, this is not the Titanic, but you all are going down. And so I've written a couple of poems that I think are helping me remember the tragedies that have come before us. Vietnam, you know, the horrors that younger men, mostly men, and some nurses lived through in Vietnam, some of which they never recovered from.
Never. Mm-hmm.
You know, so I wrote some poems about things like that, and sort of inhumanity. So that's kind of a big part of the book. I wrote some poems that are really fun about trolley cars. And then I wrote poems about my family. I was raised by my great-grandmother, and my grandmother lived nearby, and my stepmother and my father. I wrote poems that I wanted to examine their history. And my mother, who I was less close to, actually did a lot of the research that my great-grandmother had started to find out who our Wampanoag ancestors were. And so my mother did all of that research, and she made contact with the Wampanoag people, and who took her, to their bosoms, just really joyfully, as they did me. And I had a naming ceremony where in still water was given to me as my Wampanoag name.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And even the photo is very powerful. The photo of, and I love black and whites. So, the photo would just make me pick it up off the shelf. So it's in my checklist on Tavai. So it's definitely on my checklist because I love just black and white photos. And who is that? You as a child? And
that is the photo. Did I send you? Yeah, the photo is me as a baby, and I'm being held by, I believe I'm being held by my great grandmother. Ended up raising me. And on my other side is my grandmother, her daughter, and at the end is my mother. So that's 4 generations.
Wow, 4 generations.
My grandmother, my mother, my great-grandmother, 4 generations of us. And I've always loved that picture. It just, that to me just is emblematic of so many things. Like, you see how my mother is kind of off to the edge a little bit. She's not really holding anybody. And the two, my grandmother and great grandmother, they're the ones who are really holding me up.
Yeah.
That was
I will say it's such a blessing to be able to have this picture and to be able to look at this and to see this. Not many people are able to say that. And for majority of the people, especially in this country, who are able to say that, many of them are not people of color.
Yes.
A lot of people's histories and stuff have there's just no record of it. And so this right here, it's a true blessing to be able to have a photo like this, to always be able to look on to see the generations. And I don't know, it's really
powerful.
Really,
and the way you describe the dynamic, the play. Your grandmother and your great grandmother are the central characters of strength who raise you. And your mother is standing off in her own space somewhere.
Yeah, she's just slightly removed. And you'll notice my grandmother and my mother are wearing matching clothes. And they used to sew their clothes. They used to make their own clothes. And so they often made matching outfits. And so a lot of people thought they were sisters.
Wow.
They would go out to the nightclubs and dating and stuff like that. So that was, I think, more the role my mother wanted to play. She was the younger baby sister. She always wanted to be the baby. So she didn't really want a baby. So yeah, that picture says so much about me and my upbringing. And at the same time, I feel like you said, really fortunate. A lot of people don't have that. Having been raised by my great grandmother, she kept everything. Any snapshots, when she was younger, there were traveling photographers. And they would come to town and they would set up a booth and they would put a fake backdrop and they would loan you clothes and take a studio shot, one of those shots where you have to sit still for 3 minutes, And I have a couple of those, including, my great grandfather and a top hat and a jacket. And when I was young and I would see that picture, I thought, well, number one, he's a Native American. So it was like, why is he wearing these clothes? And then I learned as I got older, oh, right, the photographer gave you clothes to wear. So I have a lot of old photographs, fortunately, and I think that drives. I think of myself. And I've said this before. I think of myself as a lineophile, and that is, I go back in time to the lines that brought me to the present, and those in turn go forward into our future. And that's, I think, how I write, how I'm an activist. All of the things that have meaning to me come from the past, living through the present, and thinking about where they could be in the future.
I love that. I love that. And to round out everything, with all that's going on now, especially now in our country, and as we have you here, a wonderful, fabulous activist, what can you say to people who might be feeling a bit discouraged or a bit dismayed about how things are turning out, and what they can do to ensure a better life for not only their future, but the future of those who come after them?
Wow. Well, I read a quote recently. I happen to have it right here. And I think it's not as simplistic as this quote, but it's something we have to remember. The quote says, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." And to me, that means we cannot be overwhelmed by the tide of anger. Fear is really the big thing. It's being expressed as anger, but a lot of people are terribly afraid. They're afraid of colored people, they're afraid of women. I mean, it's just like the fear is palpable all around us. And it's like a tidal wave over us, and we must not drown under that tidal wave, but rather think about what we carry within us, whether it's our history, our knowledge, and our capabilities. We have done some amazing things in our lifetime, and we will keep doing them, because social change isn't something like a door, you open it and you close it and you're done. Social change has to be a way of life. I don't care if that means you're making masks for nurses and for us health workers, or you're volunteering at a homeless shelter, or you're making sure that young kids know how to read and understand the value of it. All of these are revolutionary acts that any of us can do, and we have to do them. And voting, of course, is the biggest revolutionary act we have right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure.
To see you. Yes. It is so great to see you. Lovely to meet you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How can people find out more about you if they want to get your books, follow you, and just keep up with all the updates?
Well, my website is my name, JewelleGomez.com. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter. So you just search for me and I'm there. Vampire Vamp.
Awesome. And of course, make sure to pick up the recently released collection of poems by Jewelle Gomez, Still Water Poems. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And of course, you can keep up with all things Team Rayceen at Team Rayceen on all forms of social media. Make sure that you click around our YouTube channel and check out our other vlogs, interviews, forums, and more. While you're there, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget, Jewelle's website will be in the description below. But most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.